Hi, and welcome to the CAFMA Connect. I'm your host, Fire Chief Scott Freitag, and with me today, once again, my reluctant co-host, Assistant Chief John Feddema.
I don't know if I can even be a co-host anymore. It's been quite a while. I've done very well.
You have. You've done well ducking this thing.
Yeah.
I actually had some recruits yesterday because I stopped by. Yesterday was the first day of the Recruit Academy. We're recording on Tuesday, so Monday. And one of the recruits said, "Hey, how do we get on the podcast?"
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, that's interesting. Most people run the other way.
Yeah.
But I think it might be good. And I told him I want to talk to Eric because I think for the interviews that training does with the new recruits, using the studio would be a good way to rotate them through.
Sure.
Because the sound quality and all that would be better. But I'm here today in my new International Association of Fire Chiefs shirt because it's fall. And I'm not good with colors, but it looks kind of fall-ish.
It looks fancy. So you look, looks nice.
We were, so Tom Shannon, Fire Chief Scottsdale Fire, we were doing a national pediatric conference, but it was all Zoom because California, whatever. But I was texting him because he had what looked like an orange pumpkin shirt on and a black T-shirt, and I told him he looked kind of like the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown.
Yeah.
Apparently other people were texting him as well, so he had to ask for some civility.
Yeah.
I don't feel sorry for him at all.
Yeah.
So last week, John, you missed it. We had a T-Rex in the room.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I don't think you are. And we greatly appreciate those folks that did that. This week, we want to talk about the elephant in the room, so to speak, and that is our current staffing challenges and operations because really, we just want to inform everybody, hey, this is what's going on, and ask for their patience and assistance and as we try to get through the next few months. Yeah. As I said, we're recording on Tuesday. Today is Election Day, so we don't know if Prop 310 is going to pass or not. This will be out Friday. We'll know by then, but not on this podcast. Even if it passed tonight, it's not going to help our staffing shortages between now and January that we face. Yeah. So why don't you give us a little bit of background on what are some of the challenges that you're seeing, and is this a reflection of your leadership that we lack so many people?
We could probably say yes and yes. Yeah, like I say, it's a challenge. I think first off, just like I say, identifying we see the issue,
right?
And it's certainly not fun. Even this morning, you saw that there was multiple text messages to try to get personnel. And if you look at the roster, there are multiple people legitimately held over for mandatory overtime. And sometimes it may seem like we don't care. Like, man, that hurts.
Right.
When we see that, because we know what challenge that brings to folks. We don't know the circumstances that they have to navigate, personally, because they're being forced to stay at work. But we know that there are challenges.
Yes,
and especially, right now you look at the number of sick call-outs, people are fighting the flu. That's in addition, like you say, to kind of that challenge that's developed over the last several months, just losing personnel.
Right.
Obviously, the most notable would be Captain Zach Fields.
Yes.
But we've also lost several people just choosing to do different jobs.
Right. Or retiring out early.
Yeah.
As we saw last week.
So, like you say, it's been kind of an ongoing deal. It was like anything else. I think there's a high and a low.
Right.
I really felt like we were doing pretty well. We were, in discussions for the budget process on how do we try to avoid some of these pitfalls of having, minimum personnel, try to reduce the mandatory overtime. And so we were talking about how do we hire early for some of those folks that were planned retirements. We really had a decent plan. We had the testing process. We have 10 people in the academy right now. That was not the original plan.
No, it was 5.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. But the original plan was to try to stay ahead of this.
Right.
Before we could even blink, before the words probably came even out of our mouths, like, hey, this is a good plan. Look what happens.
Yes.
And we had, a number of personnel that, again, we one individual decided to go be a park ranger, and one individual is going to be a traveling medic. So you never know the rhyme or reasons behind why we may lose people. We also have a number of injuries. You look at the amount of injuries that we have out right now.
And how many do we have out right now? 6 or 7 with injuries?
Yeah, something like that. Honestly, I'd have to take off my shoes probably to start counting all the way. But and that's you can't predict that either.
No, and these are significant injuries. We're not talking like a sprained ankle or a sprained wrist. We're talking back surgery, hip surgery, cancer, just any number of issues that people are out for right now. And like you said, that's not something we can account for.
Sure.
And then the losing of positions, for people to go be park rangers or traveling medic or go do their own business because the 24-hour schedule didn't work for their family.
Yep.
These aren't things that we're used to seeing in the fire service, but they're definitely creating challenges. And as you said, we thought we were doing a good thing, and we're actually over hiring for this Recruit Academy. And the reason we did that is because we see all of these things happening today with the numerous injuries, significant injuries, as well as people leaving. Yeah. And we're like, hey, we have to plan for this because we're always cutting it too close. But things have happened in the last couple of months that are simply beyond our control. It doesn't mean that we don't care. We understand the challenge for families when somebody is told, hey, you can't go home. There's childcare issues. There's other family things that were supposed to be done that aren't done now. We understand it. We're just at a loss as to how to staff and get enough people in.
Well, and part of that, the challenge with even the staffing, obviously, I think we have, it was at least a benefit to us that we were in a hiring process and we were able to make that adjustment.
Right.
While we were offering jobs, we were able to make that adjustment and, offer additional jobs and additional positions. Those individuals started the academy on Monday. So they're in a process. The challenge is that process to train personnel to be ready to be on an engine, to be a sole firefighter on an engine, that takes a while.
Yes.
And so you look at the graduation is not till January. So we have a gap where we can't just hire the personnel, put them on the engine. We're hiring people, training them, putting a lot of time and investment into them to hopefully properly prepare them for the position. Again, there's a gap we're dealing with right now that we're legitimately trying to look at, even with the BCs, talking with the BCs, how do we manage that gap? There's been a number of things, brought up, but that's something we have to continue to look at. One of them is, educational leave. Just trying to ratchet that down a little bit.
Yes.
And that's certainly going to have to be done over the next several months as we just deal with, the operational challenges of day-to-day staffing.
Right. And I did talk to training yesterday because you and I talked last week, and I asked you when graduation was, and we both just said January.
January, yes.
Eric told me yesterday it's February 16th. So it's actually mid-February before they graduate. But he thought there might be an opportunity to speed things up a little bit, and I know you're going to visit with him on what that looks like. But even if he could speed it up, you're talking a week, maybe 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So we have these 10 folks that we have in the pipeline, but we can't get them trained fast enough to get them out there to deal with the issues that we're going to face between now and December and January. And then on top of that, we have the holidays.
Sure.
That's going to create additional challenges for us with Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, all of that coming up at the same time.
Yep. No, I think it's a like anything else, it's never a convenient time for this kind of stuff to happen.
No.
And we're not obviously the only ones dealing with staffing challenges. Every agency, every business deals with staffing challenge. The difficulty we have is we cannot lose our operational readiness, and we have to hold people over. And that's the last thing we want to do, to personnel that are trying to get off, trying to, get home for their families, is to say, man, there's no one coming in. You have to stay.
Right.
That's not a fun feeling, and it's not something we want to be in the habit of. But the challenge is we're expected to be there every day responding to calls. Yeah,
when someone calls 911, they expect the engine to roll out of the station. So in addition to pulling back on some of the training leave over the next couple of months, unfortunately, we're going into the holidays, so there's less of those training opportunities out there until January, February timeframe, where we're going to have some of these folks back. And hopefully some of the injuries, we're going to start having some of them back in December. So November, December timeframe, we'll see at least 2, if not 3 people back towards the engines. There was a question out there, and we know this is at the kitchen table because we heard it through the labor management process, and you and I actually talked about it before then. Why don't you just shut down Engine 540, which truly is shutting down a station? Why don't we talk through that real quick?
Absolutely.
What is shutting down 540, which has 3 people, 3-4 people? What does that look like to you? Is there any significant impact you could see by just shutting that engine down, besides increasing call volume for the engines in PV?
Sure. No, I think there's a couple of challenges, like you say. One is throughout this whole process, we're still doing training.
Right.
And one of the benefits that 540 brings is covering some of those engines, especially in the outlining areas where they are at training. So we're not leaving, we're lessening the vacancies in those areas when we're pulling them out for training or other activities. So obviously you pull them out, you lose that operational ability. And again, I look at 540 as a station. We put them up operationally. Wasn't a plan just to put them up and then just shut them down when things get hard.
Right.
Obviously, there may be a time when we legitimately need to brown out a station. 540 is a station.
Right.
If we need to legitimately do that, we'll handle that. But to try to pull them off, this is my opinion, we're talking through this, to pull them off and throw them on one position or another. One, we don't necessarily have vacancies for them like in those certain positions. We promoted engineers, we promoted captains. You could certainly say, well, there'll be a roving captain, there'll be a roving engineer just filling holes. But the challenge is to those personnel as well.
Yes.
You hate to just, again, upend their situation as well. And so I look at, again, 540 as being a operational unit. If we get to that point when we have to have a greater discussion, you're legitimately having that discussion of browning out stations. And at that point, is that the right one to brown out?
Right. Well, and we did brown them out recently because we couldn't get staffing for that engine. So 540 is an engine that we don't do mandatory overtime for that.
Sure.
But we were able to take the 2 people from that engine, put them on a rescue, run the rescue as an ARU, as well as a rescue because we're still dealing with some ambulance challenges in the area. So that took some burden off of some other units by having them run as an ARU or added to the system. So when our other engines couldn't get ambos, we could pull the rescue in and transport if necessary.
Yeah, no, that's a great example because, like I say, we couldn't complete that staffing for that. And because they're a 40-hour week, it's not like somebody is there to hold over. Right. So we've said from the beginning we're not going to mandatorily hold somebody else over for that time period. We'll allocate those personnel. Again, we took an engine, we made it an ARU at that point.
Right.
And they did assist with different transports and just like you say, those minor calls. So in essence, we've already started that process of browning out. I think, not necessarily what some folks think as far as taking those personnel and just assigning them to a shift or a crew. Again, you look at how many people are out. That's a placebo to a bigger issue that we have right now. And is that the best call? And again, I think this is an ongoing conversation.
Well, and I think we're also, I talked to Chief Duro recently, and he let me know that one of our battalion chiefs had reached out to Prescott and said, hey, do you all have anyone trying to prevent a mandatory holdover? And so it's not that we're not trying to avoid the mandatory holdovers. And even on those days where we've had some mandatories, we're holding more people than we could get any other way. And the other part of this, we mentioned a lot of sick call-outs. And if you're sick, please call in sick. If you have a fever, don't come in because you can take out a bunch of other people. Sure. It's a flu, cold, and COVID season, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. We'll just call it a season of sickness that people go through. And we go through it every year. And kids are back in school, so kids are sick, so there's a problem. But if you're not sick, then don't call in. Sure. Don't take that sick day coming to work because you're upset about the mandatories, but you calling in sick when you're not sick creates mandatory for other people.
Sure. Yeah, obviously if there's not a reason besides you just want the day off and you're calling out sick, that, like I say, that places a burden on somebody else at this point. It's no longer just, we were talking the other day with Dennis for the labor side of it, and I'm not afraid of paying the overtime. It's not the overtime's not the issue. We'd gladly put out the overtime. The issue is obviously forcing folks to stay when they want to go home. So, like I say, sometimes with those sick call-outs, that's part of the challenge of that we can't control. I can control the ed leave that's approved and that kind of stuff, and I look at that as my responsibility. Wildland, we turned down an assignment, which is, like I say, go back to some of the other things that we're doing to try to limit the overtime or the mandatories. Was we turned down a medic assignment, which is just 2 people, but still, that's, at this point, 2 people, we need everybody we can get. So we have turned down some of those assignments so that we stay operational as best we can right now. But part of the challenge is I can't control the sick
Right.
call-outs. So we can hopefully get through this flu season and move beyond it, and like I say, get folks to work and keep going. The other part of it is we may have to do some shift moves depending
Right.
on how all the bids shake out and everything. We were looking at some moves prior to the promotions and some of the other vacancies that have been created and the retirements. So we'll see how that all shakes out. At the end of that, we'll have to look at the staffing and say, okay,
Right.
do we need to move somebody?
And we just promoted another person yesterday, or Monday this week. So Ethan got promoted to engineer. Congratulations. We've promoted Ryan Trask, Jace Hall.
Yep.
But the people who are filling those firefighter positions that are opened are at the academy and not on
Correct.
the engine.
Yes.
We're hoping that Jaron comes back in December, and he'll go through a couple weeks in the academy, but I think we can fast track him and probably get him back on the engine. We've talked about that. That'll give us another paramedic and another firefighter that we need.
Yep.
So we have some things in the works, but I know it's frustrating for everybody.
Yeah.
We get it. And we just wanted to talk about this on here, and I'm going to write about it in the review this week, just asking for patience.
Yeah.
We understand. We're not ignoring the problem. That's why we're talking about it on here.
Sure.
We just have to figure out how to ensure that when somebody calls 911, these engines roll.
Mm-hmm.
If 310 passes today, is there the opportunity that we can avoid situations like this in the future? Well, hopefully. Because if 310 passes, then we can add more personnel, and not just add an engine, but add more personnel into the system overall.
Yeah.
And I think we tried to do that through the SAFER grant. We were denied the SAFER grant this year for 5 positions. So I'm not opposed to having the conversation as we look at 310, if it passes, to adding 5 additional positions next year, not looking at another engine, just 5 additional positions to the system.
Yeah, and that was a discussion, even prior to any of the challenges that we're having right now. Go back 6-8 months ago, we were talking about the SAFER grant, obviously trying to take the minimum number of personnel, per shift from 36 to 38 to do exactly what we're talking about. The goal was to add more personnel to the engines to try to limit this in the future, because obviously this is not a new issue for us. We've dealt with this before. I certainly wish I could predict the highs and lows that we have, but I'm not smart enough to do that. So
I don't think any of us are.
Yeah. So we this is not a new issue.
Right.
But go back 8 months ago trying to talk about, okay, how do we accomplish this? Obviously, things didn't work out from the SAFER grant to losing more personnel than we even thought was, I won't say possible, but planned. So it is an ongoing high and a low, and we're definitely in a low right now. Like you say, I'm just asking people to, do your best to stay strong.
Right.
And if you're sick, stay home. If you're not, please come to work.
Take your vitamins.
Yeah.
Eat the soup, take the vitamin C, get some sunlight, something, keep yourself healthy.
Healthy, yes.
But we also know that, when you're working that many shifts in a row, you get tired and run down, and that creates additional stress, and then the stress leads to sickness, and it's a snowball effect. But as you mentioned, we weren't even looking at running a recruit academy this year.
Sure.
Until we started talking in just before July. We realized we have to do a hiring process because we weren't expecting all these people to leave. And then as we're going through the process, more people left.
Yeah.
And again, that's new. That's not something we've seen in the fire service before. But I think moving forward, our goal is to hire more people just to fill the engines. And then when we look at putting up a new engine, which we need today, we need another engine. In the past, we'd hire 12 because that was 4 persons per shift. The reality is, moving forward, looking at data, we need to hire 15 per engine. I was at Fire Rescue International, and I heard a statistic that it's 1.73 people per position that you need to properly staff.
Yeah.
And that came up just below 15. It's like 14.6, 14.7.
Yeah.
So you need 15 people per engine. So the goal is to work towards staffing better in the future with more people.
Sure.
Trying to get to 4-person engines in certain areas, because even the Valley has trouble with the constant staffing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And being our own little island up here, it's even more difficult to maintain a constant staff. But I think as we move forward, the goal is to look at, hey, let's identify some stations that would be beneficial to have constant staffing. So we have plans. We're looking at the issues. We're talking about the issues. We talked at labor management about some of the challenges.
Sure.
We just don't have a solution in the next 3 months.
Yeah. Well, and go back to what you're talking about, even from the standpoint of we need to continue to look at, even as a fire service, how are we managing and looking at, just the number of people we need per position. Obviously, that's, an area we need to look at. The other part of it is, I would say, even for myself, coming from CYFD into CAFMA, and then obviously moving into the position, I think some of it is looking at going from, 7 stations, to 10 stations, and also looking at the environment right now. And I guess you could, at this point, we're 11 stations because of 540. So as we look at that, obviously, it's just continuing to look at our own, go back to what you said from the very beginning, our own leadership and our own mindset to how we staff some of this. And the adjustment we make, today, hopefully the adjustment we're trying to make in this academy that we're doing, hopefully will help, navigate this better in the future.
We certainly ended up with more applicants this time by not requiring firefighter 1 and 2.
Yes.
And I think there's 3 or 4 out of the 10 that don't have it, and then 5 or 6 that do.
Sure.
Which is great.
Yeah.
They're good numbers and they're good people that we brought in. But it takes time to get people through an academy.
Yep.
And so we'll evaluate this academy at the end and say, okay, did this go too long? Was it too short? Could we have sped things up, or did we speed things up? And we can look at all of those things moving forward.
Yep.
The other part of this long term is recruitment to the area. I know the city of Prescott just did a study with Yavapai College, and the median home price in Prescott was at $672,000.
Yeah.
It was higher than Boston. And so the cost of living up here is at minimum 20% higher than other places. So recruitment and retention as we move forward are going to become an increasingly greater issue.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned to you before we started, and I think this is a good time just to mention a couple of things that we're looking at. I had 2 meetings with Yavapai College before I came here today to record. The first one was with a family friend of the Fields family, and they want to do a Zach Fields Memorial Scholarship with Yavapai College for the fire science program. So myself, the fire science director, and Nancy met this morning to have the initial meeting. Robert, the new head of the fire science program, is going to the foundation for the college because they handle scholarships. Yeah. So we'll get that ball moving, and then more meetings will be happening. Our hope is to have a scholarship program in place by next fiscal year. Why is that important? Because that's a recruitment tool.
Yeah.
That's getting people in the high schools and the junior highs interested in this career and trying to get them into the college, which gets them into the pipeline for our system in recruiting, because we love to recruit local when we can. Yeah. The second meeting dealt with childcare for emergency responders, but it also evolved into a conversation about housing, affordable housing for firefighters, paramedics, nurses, teachers. And so I think there's some good programs we're looking at. The child care program is a model in Tucson of a fallen police officer's wife started the foundation. They provide 24/7 child care, and their system has been able to cut child care costs for first responders, people that work for the fire police departments, by about 40%. And so what we were talking about was modeling a program like that, or working with that foundation to expand the program up here, but go beyond that and say, hey, look, okay, if the program can cut the cost by 40%, can the agency as an added benefit add to that and cut the 60% in half or a little bit more? Yeah. So child care costs are more affordable in this area as part of the benefit package. And then we've talked to some developers about housing developments for firefighters, police officers, what that would look like. The good news is there's no exclusion in the law, Title 48, related to us, from us owning properties like that. So we need to work with our private partners to figure out what that looks like. And Yavapai College is a partner who's looking at it. So overall, there's a much bigger dynamic here. We have the immediate, we're short people for staffing, and it's creating mandatory overtime. And we're in cold and flu season, we're in the holiday season, and we have a recruit academy that just started that's going to take 15 weeks. Longer term, we have hopefully if 310 passes, we'll be able to hire more people. So that'll increase our staffing, but that goes directly to recruitment and retention in an area that's very expensive to live.
Yeah.
And so how do we address those concerns? So just so everybody out there knows, we get it. We understand, and we are having conversations about all of those things, and outside the box conversations, like we had today, where we said, if we keep doing the exact same thing over and over again, we're going to get the same result.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So how do we change the model?
And I think hopefully, if nothing else, like any obstacle we have to go around or overcome or challenge, whether it's personally or professionally, this is obviously a professional challenge. The biggest thing is we got to deal with it head on.
Right.
You can't ignore it. You can't be blind to it. Obviously, there's been a lot of discussions about this. Openly, obviously, we are as frustrated as anybody else.
Absolutely.
Again, every time I see those text messages, you could probably look at my blood pressure, and it's like I guarantee it goes up because we don't want that either.
No.
Sometimes we feel powerless to control it, but at the same time, we have to look at how do we deal with this.
Right.
Again, not ignoring it, not saying it certainly doesn't exist, or that it's one person's fault, or it's not just sick leave. Certainly, don't take that in mind. It's a number of things that we need to accomplish, and I think, like you say, thinking outside the box, doing those, looking at those different areas, whether there's childcare, housing, looking at additional personnel. The goal is to be stronger at the end of this, be better at the end of this than we are today.
Yes. And what we see now is just a cascading effect between injuries, people leaving, the time of year that we're in. So going back to what we started with, we want to talk about this on the podcast. We want to put the review out about it so that everybody at least knows, hey, look, we recognize it and we're trying to figure out the best solution for it. But over the next couple of months, it's going to be a struggle. Yeah. And we're hoping everyone will stick with us and understand. You don't have to be happy about it. Yeah. We're not happy about it.
Sure.
But we have to deal with it. And we have to figure out the best way to approach it. So with the least impact on all of your families out there for anybody that's listening or watching. So with that, John, thank you very much for coming on and having this conversation today about this. I think next week, Jonah, we may do something on the fire in Chino recently. Had some stuff come in from social media, video.
Sweet.
Yeah, be kind of like the U Pickett fire.
Perfect. Who are you bringing in for that?
I don't know yet. It depends on what the questions were that came up related to it. Go. Maybe we could bring the Flagstaff fire chief in because the same owner owns the U Pickett in Flagstaff and the U Pickett here in Prescott Valley. And we had a 3-day event. They had a 4 to 5 day event up there. So maybe we can have a conversation about what are the costs
there you go.
to our agencies. Yes. So with that, please be patient. We understand. Continue to work with us. We greatly appreciate everything everybody's doing to ensure that the trucks continue to roll out of the stations. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.